I hope you guys enjoyed the pod. Be sure to follow us on Instagram or YouTube at podpractice_pod. Email us at show@podpracticepod or listen on Spotify at podpractice.
Maybe I'll just do an intro later, if that's cool with everybody.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like the pod's gone downhill since we stopped playing the music. I don't know. It's just like the feeling I get. The music, I feel like, really put everyone in the mood.
All right, really here it goes. This is for Kins. Welcome back to the intro music of Pod Practice. Part 2 with Grant Lindsley. Excited to have you back, Grant. I don't know if we're going to keep this in the cut or not, but happy to get everybody in the mood to talk about Frisbee and a little bit more about the mediocre monk. Welcome back, Grant. How's it going?
Going great. I'm back home after a long month of book touring on the road, so it feels good to be back and settled.
Yeah, was your family traveling with you, or were you kind of going solo on that?
Fam was with me for 2.5 weeks or so, and then I was on the road by myself for about 2 weeks.
Nice. Well, I'm sure it's nice to be sleeping in your own bed. Let's see. Should we pick up where we kind of left off with a couple book questions here? Wrap things up. I know. Actually, since we last spoke, a friend of ours, Matt Bubernack, who I don't know if you'll know him or not. Grant, you may have played against him, but he's a huge fan of the book, and so maybe I'll jump in with a couple questions from him and turn it over to Atkins. He just asked what your current meditation and spiritual practice, what does it exist, and what is that like right now?
Yeah, that's something that a few people asked throughout the tour, and is an open question that I'm still trying to answer. Because, I mean, in short, the amount of time that I'm actually sitting in a quiet room by myself and setting a timer and, crossing my legs and closing my eyes and, meditating in kind of the conventional way is honestly, it's like nearly 0 minutes per week right now. Baby, new job, the book being out. It's just like, it's kind of been chaos. So I haven't been doing that much, but the way that I've been answering that question some is that I have expanded the definition of what effective meditation can be.
That was going to be my follow-up, actually. Yeah.
And so, in some ways that could be a cop-out answer. And maybe like I would have viewed that answer as a cop-out answer, like while I was in my more kind of extreme mindset in the monastery. But in a lot of ways, it feels pretty genuine because a lot of meditation is really, like, monks call it practice for a reason. It's if you think about like what you're practicing for, it's life outside of sitting in a room by yourself. And so I've been trying to use a lot of the same kind of like focus on the breath. And for me in particular, that means often like slowing down my breathing, very consciously slowing my breathing down in certain moments where if I'm not aware of my breath, it gets pretty shallow and pretty short. And like one easy example is if I'm feeling some tension with my wife, or like we're arguing about something, it's really easy for my shoulders to kind of get raised up a little bit, my chest to kind of tighten, kind of close in, breathing gets like shallow like a squirrel's, and that impacts the way that I show up and like speak and interact with her. And so it's not meditating alone in a room, but if I'm like just conscious of my body a little bit more, I'm a little bit less likely to kind of be defensive or interrupt her. Maybe I'm better at listening. Also more likely to kind of talk about what I'm feeling instead of like describe her or something like that, trying to solve the problem prematurely. I don't know if we need to go too much more into my relationship dynamics, but this is pod therapy practice. But I mean,
We'll take it.
a lot of the ways that I try to meditate now are just like dropping my awareness from my little thinking brain into my body while I'm out in the world interacting with people, and also while I'm training. I mean, I think I don't know if y'all do this ever. I'd be curious to know if you do, but you know, a lot of people talk about like running as a meditation or something like that, and I've run for a lot of my life, like distance running, and certainly in some ways, I think the actual point while you're playing Frisbee can feel like it can feel really absorbing. You know, it's fun to feel kind of present minded in that. But one of the things that I'm trying to do is bring some of the more kind of like intentional, conscious awareness into my body while I'm actually training, while I'm playing. And so that's looked like trying to slow my breathing down, for example, be a little bit more aware of my breathing while I'm
Right.
like doing A runs or
So
I keep
there is a
wanting to
lot of
do it
like
during an actual point,
like to
but I haven't been
meditate.
able to do it yet. Yeah,
Just
yeah. Like
just
I'll be
stop.
standing on the
Stop at
line,
the
we're
point.
about to receive the pull, and I'll kind of make a commitment to myself, like try at this point. You know, try to just like play the point, you know, but also actively think about my breathing and like my body moving in space. And I forget every time. I haven't been able to do it yet.
That is, I like
I
the
guess that,
idea
yeah.
though of trying to transfer those skills and lessons that you've learned and apply them to more active times in life.
To me, it makes me wonder then what is meditation? Like, what are you trying to achieve when you're meditating? Is it just focus on whatever you're doing, or or what does that to you look like?
Yeah, I've heard other people kind of define meditation as yeah, developing focus. And so sometimes that means like, you know, you're actually staying on focused on some object, and it could be like a mantra, or it could be your breath, or it could be maybe it's a movement. Um, and but a lot of people describe meditation as the process of returning to that object of meditation, because so often for many people, certainly for me, what happens is you start off on that object,
Mm-hmm.
and then you start thinking, or you get distracted, and
Right.
it's like you're down this rabbit hole 6 chapters into like some random thought. You know, this bus outside my window reminded me of the time I brought my kid on a bus, which reminded me of the children's museum we took him to. And then I'm like, oh
Yeah,
wait, back here we are, you know.
this is what we're
Totally.
actually doing.
Because
Yeah.
then I wonder then if you were playing Ultimate, then would that look more like actually being completely engulfed in the act of playing Ultimate more than trying to like maybe that's one reason it's so difficult to like find your breathing and whatnot. Like maybe meditating while playing Ultimate is like truly just being in the moment
It's
of
that
like
flow state.
whatever you're doing on the field, you know? Like I wonder
Yeah, I
if
don't
that's what it
know.
is when you're doing anything.
It could be part of that. The part of me that wonders if it's something more is that there is that oftentimes for me, at least when I'm playing, there's not really an awareness of
Yeah.
what I'm doing. Like there's flow state, but maybe not an awareness of the flow state. And maybe this starts to just get too heady. But
Yeah, man.
I like the idea of kind of being in the flow state and also knowing I'm in it, you know, and maybe that allows you to deepen it even more. I don't
But
know.
and I wonder if like the knowing you're in it though almost like contradicts the being in the. I guess that's what you're trying to figure out.
It could,
Is like,
yeah,
can you
yeah. I'm
be
not the
in the?
expert.
Can you be? No, I mean that's kind of like a really interesting question. Like, can you be in a flow state and also be trying to like be aware of it? Because maybe it's like even that distraction of trying to be aware of. Because maybe if you were truly in a flow state, you wouldn't be
Yeah,
able to be aware
I don't
of
know.
it.
I
You would
feel
just
like
be flowing on whatever you're doing in
when you
front of
hear
you.
athletes talk about it, it seems like at least after in retrospect, they always know that they were in the zone. I mean, we've told this story a
Right.
million times, but Atkins, you in finals last year were telling me that you felt zen in the moment, and
Yeah.
to me, maybe you were aware of it.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Right.
I mean, I think we could all agree that like there are really different headspaces that you can be in while you're playing, and some of them are more pleasurable and like translate to more effective play than others. Um, do you think you Kins were in like your ideal headspace during
Yeah, I would
Final
say that
Cluster?
was my ideal head. I have never felt that peaceful while playing a game of Ultimate before. And there were like a lot of weird things. Like I remember one of the weirdest things that I felt like started the headspace was we were in the huddle beforehand, and I mean, overall the team culture had been so good that I felt less worried about things, and I wasn't feeling a lot of pressure because I didn't necessarily feel like winning was like in the moment I was like so not focused on winning that there wasn't like a lot of pressure to, perform or whatever. And then also there's this moment sticks out to me where we were in the pregame huddle, and I obviously like make eye contact with people a lot, but I don't know, like really long eye contact with someone, like that you would hold for a while, I think would be uncomfortable. And I remember Jarv, Matthew, AG just staring at me, and we stared at each other for, I don't know, like we made eye contact for in the huddle, like while whoever was talking for like a long time. And it snapped me into some like weird headspace. I think because it was so, I don't know, different. It was it was a lot of different things, but I remember that moment especially as being something that kind of, I don't know why it would have the effect of making me lock in and not necessarily thinking about the other
Yeah.
external things. Because I think the main like effect, if I was trying to like explain it to someone, was just that normally I can get really distracted by things that like the other team is doing, or like, it's really easy when you're on the O line to be like walking to the line and being like, God, I can't believe our D line just like did that shit, and be like thinking about that shit for a long time. But like in that game specifically, it was something would happen, and maybe like, you consider it for like a second, and then it would be like back to the moment of like what was going on. So like my processing was happening very quickly during
So
that
you were
game.
coming back. You were refocusing into the
Right,
moment
because
very
I
quickly.
even remember like something happening on the field that would normally like really fucking annoy me and like get me going, or like calls. Like it was the same
It
thing.
was a
Like
couple of
someone called a
calls, I think.
foul, yeah, and that would normally like bug me for a while, and like maybe a couple points later, I would be talking about it, which means that you're like subconsciously, even if you're not, you're still kind of thinking about it. Whereas in that game, it was all just like going
Um,
to the wayside, and anything that was happening in the moment was like what was taking up my brain's power. It was very interesting. It's the farther it goes away, the harder it is. You're like
it feels like a
grabbing
dream,
and like,
almost like you can barely
yeah,
remember.
and it's like harder and harder to explain, which is why like I really, and I regret not doing it. And actually, this is kind of one of the questions I wanted to talk to you about, Grant. But like I really wanted to just write it down. Like I just had this insane urge, but I never write things down. Like I'm not someone who journals a lot or anything. But like after that game, I wanted to just like go and like try to like write down everything that I had like felt and like had been happening, which could have been helpful. Maybe it wouldn't have been helpful, but like just because it was so important, like I felt like I wanted to capture it more in the moment. Um, and I wonder then, like, for a question for you is like, because you obviously, at least in the book, you were journaling a lot. Like, what motivates you to write something down? Like, what are things that you like want to write about when you do journal?
Yeah, that's a good question. And there are like four different things that you said that I want to come back to.
Okay.
But the journaling impulse for me sometimes, well, the way that I would talk about this on the tour was that I knew going into this experience in Thailand for half a year that I was gonna probably feel changed and like transformed in some ways afterwards. Um, but that if it was gonna be like any other kind of big trip I'd done, that a year later or so, the memories were basically going to have faded into like two or three stories that I tell in the same way every time. and I didn't want that to happen. And so a journal was a way of keeping, just like preserving the complexity of the memory.
Mm-hmm.
And the other reason eventually that it was specific to this monastic experience was that I was just so damn lonely for a few of the months that I was there, that journaling felt like this, like just a touch of communication, even if it was communication to myself. It was like a little bit less crazy than talking to myself out loud, and more like acceptable to me somehow to be writing it down.
So your
And
phone
then
was
I
in
guess the
your
last thing
backpack,
is
right?
it's helpful to like, yeah, my phone was in my backpack, but it was off the whole time, even though I really strangely, and I still don't know how this happened, got like a text one night when I was in this hut where my backpack
The
was.
punch pizza, right?
Yeah, a text like promoting a deal for this pizza place, which was torture because I wanted nothing more than pizza for a lot of the time that I was there. But I guess the last thing I would use writing for is just to clarify and like try and understand, because something about forming sentences makes me think a little bit more like linearly or something than just like swirling in my own head again and again. So yeah,
Mm-hmm.
those were some of the reasons why I wrote. And then just to go back to the one of the first things you
Yeah.
said, Kins, that kind of got you locked into that finals game, um, was the eye gazing thing. That is a practice that I haven't done very much, but I've done it maybe 3 or 4 times as like a kind of a spiritual practice where you, with a stranger or with somebody that silently lock eyes and just hold eye contact for a period of time. And it's a really intense
Dude,
way of
it was
like grounding yourself and
intense.
connecting with somebody else. Yeah.
I think it's so intense because while it was happening, like a lot of my reactions, I just would be to look away, look away, look away, look away. So you're like fighting that urge constantly while you're like staring at this person. And it was just, yeah, very intense. Cause it makes me think a lot of the times when I enter like spaces of like when I'm really thinking about things or after something super strange or abnormal has happened. Like even like the other day, like my roommate and I, like not Saeed, my other roommate, we like got into a fight after we were playing Call of Duty together, right? But we never fight, so it was very strange, right? But like so it was, but like after altercations or like something like that, I find myself getting the most thoughtful, and I guess like in the moment, and more like my brain turns on, and I kind of get out of the like just autopilot mode, because I guess because something so unique has happened that it like forces my brain to be like, yo, what is going on? Like, whereas normally it's just like going through the motions of like things that I've encountered a lot. So I don't know if like that's part of the effect, because it was like so weird for me to stare at someone and like not look away for that long of a time, that my brain like started to just work a little bit harder after that, because I guess it encountered something that was so different than what it normally encounters. I'm not sure. I just remember it being very impactful.
It stood out to you.
Definitely, it was one of the things that like stood out from that time period.
Yeah. And maybe shaped the way that you played, or at least the way that you felt during that game. Did I have a few questions about the experience of playing Bravo last year, because in my experience of playing club nationals, my first one was in 2006. It is the hardest tournament to win, and so many things can need to go right in order to win all the games that you have to win that tournament. Did you? And I'm curious, yeah, how Quinn, you'd answer this question too, but like before nationals, before Thursday of nationals even happened, was the season for Bravo, did it feel kind of charmed to you? Did it feel different? um, did you feel like coming into the series like, we got this, or did it feel like kind of similar to a lot of other seasons you've had?
It's funny, these answers are going to be so different. So Quinn, you go first. You talk first.
This is a good question.
Yeah. It's interesting because I don't know if you know this, but we lost at regionals. We didn't win our region. And so at that point it felt it didn't feel good, obviously. Like, it was going into nationals, it was like, well, shit. But we kind of came together after that loss. It felt like that loss was like the slingshot for us. And the whole season I was very confident in our ability to be a top 4 team. I was very, very confident in like making semis, and then after that, who knows, because it's nationals. So it did a bit. I think maybe just in my own head, I just felt like we had such a talented team, and I knew what we were capable of. And then that adversity before nationals, and even at nationals when we lost to Goat in pool play, just kind of was like a ramp, like just an absolute slingshot for us. And we experienced that, and we all came together again. We're just like, all right, like, we can go one of two ways. We can fizzle out and just be another Bravo team of the past 3-4 years that doesn't have what it takes, or we can use this experience that we just had to, kind of ramp us into pool play, into bracket play. Because at nationals, everybody thinks, really anybody can win this tournament. Like you said, so much stuff needs to go right, and being the best team never guarantees that you're going to win at all. So in a way, it did feel charmed for me. But it wasn't necessarily just always like that. There was so many ups and downs, and I think the downs were probably the part that made us the team that we were, and helped us get to the point that we got to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like that you said that.
Mikey, I'm curious to hear your perspective as the coach too.
As the coach.
Same.
Well, what always comes to mind, Grant, you mentioned how a lot of things kind of have to go the right way, and I've thought about that a lot, and just even how narratives can be created from 1-point losses or 1-point victories, or even just thinking about the current NBA playoffs. Like, unfortunately, Kansas poor Sixers lost to the Celtics, but in Game 6, like, Jason Tatum has 3 shitty quarters. I don't know. He was like 2 or 3 for 18. I don't know what the stat line was, and then he destroyed the Sixers in the fourth and dominated them in Game 7. And I heard, some commentators talking about how if he didn't have a good fourth quarter, like what we're talking about with Jason Tatum is much different. And I've thought about that with our season quite a bit, because there were some sort of inflection points. We lost. I think we lost to UN Universe. I don't know if you were. I was not there. I don't know if you were there at Pro Champs. Kins was not healthy yet. But so up until that point, though, like, we were having a really good season, and we didn't necessarily have a bad season afterwards, but it just, like, that narrative really changed. Like, okay, Bravo, not, super young, not a contender, whatever. And then we lose at regional. So, we go from likely a 4 or 5 seed to an 8 seed. And so there is a ton of surprise that we would be in contention by the end of it. But the whole time I'm thinking, like, this is kind of good for us. Like, we maybe aren't ready for a lot of the expectations. We talked to Keegan, and Keegan talked about, at this point, you're probably similar, Grant, being such like a veteran, having won so much. You kind of know what that feeling is like to be at the top and, like, be at the peak and trying to stay at the peak. Whereas we were a team trying to ascend a little bit, and I think we still are. So I think what Quinn said is he hit the nail on the head in terms of we needed the bumps along the way. And I thought, having gone through more failure by the time of finals was hugely in our favor over truck stop. Like, not as much pressure. We also had been able to figure out like, okay, we're not going to be perfect most of the time. And so like there's sort of like this pressure relief, and I felt like we could play more freely. I can never like fully say that is true, but it did feel that way.
And we had played them already a bunch that year as well. So it wasn't like the first time like playing New York or something like that. Or
right.
I guess Ring or something.
Yeah, and thinking about like earlier we were talking about like flow state and everything, and I was thinking about like back when I was a player, things that were helpful for me would be like teammates saying like, hey, don't worry about that mistake. It's okay. Like make sure you just keep taking that shot in this situation. We want you to be doing this. And then conversely, like if like I turn it over and a teammate's like, dude, you just can't take that look or whatever. Sometimes that might be true, but I just think about how I get in my own head. And we had gone through all those fuck ups, and we had reached the point where like, we're kind of playing with house money. Like, let's just have fun, go along for the ride. And I don't know if we can replicate that, but I definitely hope so.
Yeah. I think we can. And I think that was one of the biggest things. So it was funny because you asked about like the season leading up to it. And the reason it was so weird for me is because I didn't play the whole season. I got hurt like late in the AUDL season. So I didn't play any tournament with Bravo until Nationals. So that was my first tournament ever being on the team playing for Johnny Bravo, which is crazy.
Nice.
That's the first time I put the jersey on, played for the team. It's nuts. It's really nuts to think about. So like individually, I think that contributed to a couple things. One, I was super happy to be playing Ultimate again. That part of the like pressure of winning and like getting stuck in that mindset was lifted because I was just so happy to play and be able to play at this tournament with like these guys. Like it, so that contributed a lot to like a healthy mindset, as well as the fact that like, because I was still somewhat hurt, I was able to accept more of a role on the team and like a smaller role and be very happy and content with the fact that like, I'm not going to have to try to do too much. Like it like took all this weight off my shoulders that I generally would feel like, especially having like stuff that I would always put on myself, like especially playing like college, it would always be like me putting it on myself. Like, oh, I need to make sure I have a really good game because I'm one of the better players on this team. And if I don't have a really good game, we're not going to win. So like that would be like a thought that would go through my head a lot before games in like college and stuff. Whereas at this Nationals, I felt very much just like another part of the team that, you know, would, if played well, like would help. If didn't play well, like wasn't the end all be all of like the team wasn't going to win. So that was really big for me. I thought like one thing that was super helpful was our team was we played everyone in like every game. I'm pretty sure everyone at least played 1 point in every game. So the team culture and like vibe, there was not a single person who, especially by the end of the tournament, was upset that could bring down the vibe at all. Like everyone was content and happy to be with what they were doing on the team. So they were just happy to be like vocal on the sideline, helping in whatever way they could. And a lot of that was because they knew they would get in the game too. So they were ready. Like the vibes of the team were immaculate. And then the final thing that I think really helped with the team was similar thing. Like we had the 2 really big Airbnbs, and I was in an Airbnb with Matthew and Plow, who were like polar opposite of me, or used to be at least polar opposite of me in terms of like, I was very competitive. Like I want to win. And I romanticized like winning Nationals like a bunch in my head. Like, you know, cause I grew up playing Ultimate. Like it was always like the top of the mountain that I wanted to reach. Whereas they are a lot more like, no, we just like love each other. And like, you know, like it's like that kind of shit, which I always used to be like, no, fuck off. Like that's all great, but I really want to win too. But I remember like I was on a whole trip that whole weekend because I was saying like before the finals day, like after semifinals, like I was like, I don't care if we win this. I just want to try to play as well as we can. And I think that's a super important mindset because like I said, I used to romanticize it a lot, but then once you win too, you realize like, yeah, a million things go your way. If a couple things had changed differently, we could have easily have not won, and it wouldn't have changed that much about the season. So like, I think the biggest thing, like when you're playing in these tournaments or games, is like the focus really should be just trying to play your best as a team, because like a lot of other things are out of your control. Like we could play a team that just is like genuinely better than us, or like is gonna play like amazing that day, and there's just like nothing you can do about that. So like the goal in my mind, and I honestly like I lose sight of this a lot, like after that tournament I'll lose sight of it, but I try to remain focused on that, is like the goal is just to like play as the best you can as a team and get better. Like that is the only goal, because the winning in some ways is just not in your control. Like you don't really control whether or not you're going to win club nationals. All you can do is like try to play your best, and like if the chips fall the right way, you might win. And I think that was like one of the biggest takeaways for me after winning, because I used to dream about it all the time and I thought like it would be the most amazing thing, and then after it happens you're like, yeah, like other things were more important about it, and you realize how many things like went the right way that just, you know, made it maybe not as special as it like you build it up to be in your head. Like the winning part, a lot of the other things were way more special, like the coming together as a team, like all those feelings I felt in those moments were way more meaningful to me, and I take those like I will take those way longer in my life than the like actual winning of the tournament.
Yeah, and it's weird how sometimes winning is like necessary in order to take your eyes off of it and see the bigger picture, you know. Like and some wins, I mean, for me at least, some wins have felt really different than others. Like sometimes a championship has felt like, I'm just glad we didn't lose. You know, we did what we were supposed to do. We performed exactly as I knew and expected us to perform. And then others are relief. Like, yeah, more relief, more like winning to not lose. And others, like the one club title that I have was that, you know, Revolver in 2017 had no business losing to any team, and we didn't. And it was like, okay, we did it. Check the box. We avoided despair of having like not done what we know what you're supposed to do. You know. Dude, but then other championships,
sorry, I
feel
just
totally
can't believe
different.
You only
and
have
it's
one
just like pleasure.
title.
We did it. Yeah, only one. I was thinking about it recently. I try not to count, but finals maybe.
No one likes a counter.
Finals maybe 4 times, and semis like 8 or something like that.
3 now with Pony,
and 2 of the finals have been losses on double game point. 2016 Revolver lost to Ironside. 2021 Pony losing to Ring.
And you would think that one victory then would be so meaningful for you, and like you're saying right here, it was like we better have won. Like, it wasn't like.
Can you sort of rank your championships? Like playing on the World Games team, what is that experience like?
Those have felt different. Those have felt like wins where losing was a very real possibility, and both teams 2017 and 2022 did lose games. And did both lose games during the tournament, and so we really tasted our mortality and knew that losing was possible, and knew that there were other teams that really could beat us if we were off at all. And then the fact that the roster is so tiny, you know, it's 14 people, so you're just like way more involved there. At least the way that it was played the last 2 times, we didn't really necessarily have set O and D lines. So you're getting a much more like kind of full in the game D and O immersive kind of like high school almost experience, where it's just like you were just in and you're playing all the time.
Sounds so fun. So
it is. I mean, it's so fun, and it's so tough. And the other teams also want it so badly. I mean, people are sobbing afterwards when they lost. Like we saw that, you know. So those were victories. Also, the other thing is the games are to 13, which is so fast. If you go down by 2 breaks early, like it's probably over. You know, it's not enough time to be able to come back. So yeah, each of those games, you know, and each of those tournaments felt like such absolute sprints, and you had to be so amped up and focused that winning them felt amazing. You know, like that was the real, like, winning for winning felt great. You know, like I actually felt pleasure and celebration about it, as opposed to feeling like relief that we just hadn't messed up.
That's actually really interesting, because I would think for those teams, like the world's teams, that it would be similar to the one like Revolver, where it's like you expect to win, and you know, that's just like, because you guys, you know, you should be so good, like the world, you're like, you from an outside perspective, like that's what you would think, you know. So it's just interesting to hear how you say that, and I wonder like what are the what things in people's heads contribute to, like, because it really is so internal, like for each person, like what makes, because you could win a championship on a team, be the star player, and maybe you feel amazing about it, and the person who like barely contributed like doesn't feel great about it for whatever reason. So like it's whatever narratives you like build up in your head that will contribute to like how you feel afterwards. And so it's interesting, like what I mean, that's like always what we're searching for as like athletes, I guess, is like what should our mindsets be like going into these things. And it's hard to figure out, but it's really, I find that really interesting that they're different.
The fact that you have to play both ways too. I love that. I love that format. I would love it if more versions of Ultimate were that way, where you truly have to. I mean, that's, I assume, why Ultimate's called Ultimate, because you have to do everything.
Is
it's
that
the
why?
ultimate
Question.
sport.
I don't know why it's called Ultimate.
I think I've heard something like that. It's like the ultimate
Oh,
version
God.
of whatever. But
I'm curious, but on this playing two ways discussion, did you or other people on the team have trouble playing both ways? Because for me personally, if I'm in club, I find that it's hard for me as a predominantly O-line player. Sometimes it's hard for me to go out and play a really solid D point, like on a moment's notice, just because it's such a different headspace and it's so different for me. So doing that constantly during a tournament, did you find that? I think you're a predominantly O-line player too. Did you find that like difficult, or did anybody else on the team find it
now you're
difficult
predominantly
to kind of
D-line.
switch? Well, now, yeah.
I'll actually tie.
Well, I mean,
I'll tie something in too, with just to shout out Manny Eckert for asking, "Do you like playing O or D better?" But continue.
Cool. Yeah, for all of my club life up until like a couple of years ago, I've been O. So I was playing, you know, starting O-line with Chain Lightning as a 16-year-old.
Yeah.
You know,
Crazy.
in the semis against Furious George, and just feeling like, who are these men that I'm playing with?
Yeah, I believe
This is wild. I'm like a foot shorter and 30 pounds lighter than everybody.
That's how I feel when I play Pony today.
Yeah, that's true. Pony's a big team now. And I've always just liked it. I always liked, you know, being chased, kind of like the trickery of O. Also, you just get, it's like more consistent glory, you know, because you get to hold the disc more and catch it and throw it more. And I think it was fast forward to 2017 tryouts for the World Games team. I had applied late just because Lucas Dahlman, one of my favorite players and teammates and captains of all time from Revolver, was just like, dude, you should just apply. Like, just go to the tryout, because it's really fun to be on the same field with like 30 of the best, you know, of the best players. Just go for the weekend. And I'm like, okay, cool. So I applied, I go, I have a, you know, amazing time. I think it was Saturday, Sunday. So playing Saturday, Sunday morning, we're in the hotel eating breakfast, and Dutchy, the head coach, comes up to me and he's like, you've been playing well. If you want to make this team, you have to play defense. And I know that you can produce offensively, but everybody on this team has to be able to do both. So today, like, here's a list of a few players. You need to do it. And that was the first time in my entire career where I had a coach basically say, you're not doing enough. And, for like, not trying to toot my own horn, I was just always on like the better half of every
Mhm.
team that I'd ever played for. And so I hadn't gotten a ton of constructive feedback about defense. Dutchy gave it to me and I was like, oh shit, like I want to make this team now. Also, I've never been given this feedback. I really want to try and like make it happen and see what I can do. And that was the first time where I started to really like care and
About
try
that.
hard and kind of enjoy and start to, in some ways I already knew, from like the handful of layout blocks that I'd gotten over like the decade before that, that getting a block is like maybe the best feeling thing in Frisbee. Because it's so hard and it's not consistent. I mean, for me, it's not. And then being able to have Dylan Freechild as a teammate for the first time on that 2017 team also kind of opened my eyes to a different mindset entirely that I could bring to Frisbee that was useful for playing in general, but was especially helpful for me on defense, because I'd always been kind of trained and like just inclined to be that kind of like even keeled type of player who doesn't get too high, doesn't get too low. And Dylan at that time was this like different approach of like allowing yourself to get really hot and then also maybe opening yourself up to getting really down. And I was like, you know what, I'm down to try this and experiment, because I don't know, as I get on into my 30s, I have to figure out a way to make to keep Ultimate interesting, and I have to do that by trying new stuff. And so yeah, trying out new mindsets, allowing myself to get more hot, allowing myself to, be more disappointed if something goes wrong. And then also taking on new roles, like trying to play D-line,
Yeah.
has been really fun. But yeah, it was definitely a different mindset to play both sides at World Games. And I liked it because obviously it's just like more to do. And I felt more like any given point, I got to be locked in on something different.
Yeah.
Do you remember who the players were that he wanted you to match up with on D?
I think he said, I remember Peter Pryl was one.
Mm-hmm.
I think maybe George Stubbs was another.
That sounds right.
Maybe Cassidy. I remember seeing something you said, Quinn, about Cassidy, and I would just echo it. To me, he is like an all-timer to me. And I know we're like roughly the same age or something, but I always, not always, but since he kind of rose to prominence on Revolver, I've always really admired his game. He's such a complete player. And I'm pumped that apparently he's going to come back and be playing Revolver again.
No way,
this
really?
season.
No way.
Yeah.
Grand
Why did he
bomb.
Grandma.
He was coaching. He was coaching. Revolver
What
last year,
happened? Did he get hurt?
I'm
I
not
did
sure.
wonder that, yeah, because it seemed like he just kind of stopped. And that's cool. That is exciting.
Yeah, no, I just to touch on that, I like you and Cassidy were like the two players that I really looked up to when I was younger, and then wanted to like kind of play like and be like. So that's very cool that like Cassidy was someone like that for you as well. And one more question on the world's games thing here too. I don't know if you view yourself as like a pure hybrid. I view you as a very pure hybrid, especially like when you were making the world game teams like 2017. Do you have any tips for that process as a hybrid? Just because I feel like I don't know if this is entirely true, but it does feel like they look for specialization a lot, in players that are specialized in one thing to do, like handling or cutting or just whatever. And what was that like as like being a hybrid and trying to make that team as one?
Yeah, I mean, I think for a long time I would have only characterized myself as a cutter, and
Cutter with throws, though.
Yeah, I guess a cutter with throws. But I kind of look back at, like, I'll watch the 2017 World Games footage, and there's not actually that much, but watching myself, I would be cutting really aggressively, and then often what I would be doing is dumping it. And I never really felt like I was as dangerous with my throws as I was cutting. One of the things that has definitely helped me become more of a hybrid is playing D, because I usually find that I naturally kind of drift towards cutting if I feel like handlers are creating really good flow and I can like take advantage of the openings of like the lateral space, changing.
Mm-hmm.
But if I feel like the flow is not being created, then I feel like I have to go back and start creating that some. Um, so just being in a situation where I feel like the thing that's going to benefit that particular offensive unit, even if it's a D line, the most is handling, then I'm going to do that. And the other piece of coaching that I got on Revolver from Mike Payne that was really helpful was he would just be aggressive about the necessity to break the mark in a way that no coach had ever really been for me. And just thinking about the value of breaking the mark, more than the value of hucking, even just breaking the mark. He like just again and again and again, he would talk about, the way to kind of like step forward on an IO flick instead of step wide on an IO flick, and how that helps you stay balanced. And, these things that
Speaking to my soul
really
right
helped.
now.
Nice. Okay. Yeah, cool. So it really helped point out some mechanical flaws in my like throwing mechanics, that have been really helpful for me to continue to work on. So yeah, I guess, I don't know, tips for being a hybrid, just like put yourself in the other role.
Sure.
Or have coaches who push you into it.
Yeah. That's funny. When you mentioned the breaking the mark versus hucking, I literally think we had that exact conversation on a previous podcast about what would you rather have out of like your center handler or just a player in general, is like someone who breaks the mark at will or someone who can rip it 70 yards on a plate for anybody. Like, and I think we all came to the conclusion that probably breaking the mark is generally going to be the better skill to have. But, it's just funny you mentioned that.
Comes up more often, I think. It opens
Yeah.
things up for other people.
And if it's windy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ken,
We could really
do you
get into
have
a rabbit hole on that.
you have a yeah, we can. You have a question highlighted here. Do you want to touch on that?
Well,
one?
yeah, because Grant talked about it a little, but because you were saying like you needed new mindsets to like keep things interesting. Like, I just wanted to ask you like what role Ultimate has in your life and has always had potentially, and how that's changed, and like what keeps you coming back to the sport.
Yeah.
Like, obviously you could do a bunch of different things. Like, why do you decide to keep coming back and play?
Maybe I can add to that too, like your transition back from Thailand. Like what was that like?
Ultimate has played such a big role with just ready-made community for me in a way that I don't think I was really aware of until I, started dating somebody and married somebody who didn't have Ultimate, and also started to imagine what retirement's going to look like, and kind of realizing that retirement would look like losing this whole huge community and schedule and kind of purpose that repeats every year. So yeah, having just like ready-made community is so valuable, and I think especially for me as I've started to get older and get like afraid of being a man, especially who's like friendless and consumed by children and work. I'm like, I don't want that to happen. And so one way is just to keep playing Frisbee. But the other thing that it's just made me reflect on is how difficult it can be outside of Frisbee to create a community, and I've researched this some, and how a lot of athletes who have really dived deep into their sport feel depressed and kind of like listless for a long time after retiring. So the community is a big part of what keeps me coming back, without, kind of sounding cliche about it, but you just don't have to work very hard to have like a lot of friends, and to have also like a purpose and a reason to train. And that's the other thing that I like, is it's like if I weren't playing Frisbee, there's no way I would have gone out to like the track today and done the workout that I just did, you know? And so being able to stay fit is also something I'm really grateful for from Frisbee, because plenty of my friends, you know, a lot of my, like, I don't know, high school friends or just a lot of peers who don't have Frisbee, none of them are playing sports like as competitively as I am. And you know, they perhaps rightfully also make fun of me. I remember one of my roommates who played football in college would always make fun of the sport that we play, because it's the only sport that whose name is an adjective. You know, and yeah, but it's a small enough community that I can be really competitive and kind of like feel like, you know, I'm trying for like to be the best, and that feels cool too.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm especially after coming back from the injury, I feel like I want to keep at it. I want to keep at it for as long as I can.
Yeah. What
It
about
is fun.
the transition back from Thailand? How did you just jump straight back into it? I kind of remember you played US Open or something?
Yeah, I came back from Thailand in April, and then I played that Sub-Zero season. I don't remember very much of it. I think it was a pretty typical Sub-Zero season at the time, like average tournament performance and maybe quarters and expected kind of loss around that stage of the tournament. But, well, I mean, I remember I think the first tournament getting hucked to laying out, catching it, and I think it was Tristan, but some like young player being like, "Did you imagine that was like a plate of rice when you were like laying out for it?" So like,
God.
definitely some people didn't, you know. And also, I was like really aware of how everybody was on their phones all the time, and I did this probably like annoying joke, you know, where in between games everybody would be on their phones, and I just like pop over their shoulder and be like, "Hey guys, like what's up on the phone?" Probably, you know, kind of riding my high horse about how I'd been without one for half a year.
What about physically? Like, was it hard to get in shape again?
Yeah, I mean, when I stop working out, I kind of tend to waste away instead of like getting bigger. And so I don't have a lot of weight to lose, but I was like probably 25 pounds lighter than I am now. And the first run that I did, I was still in Thailand, but I'd left the monastery, and the first run just hobbled me for like a week. So that was, I mean, yeah, that was kind of tough, but that was probably one of the easiest things to return to and reintegrate into my life, because it was friends. I didn't feel like there was, you know, I kind of knew who I was coming back into it, whereas like I didn't really know who I was coming back into like work or something like that. And I'd also kind of critically gotten as close to a sign off as you can get from the like senior monk who I'd spent most of the time with. And I think appears like later in the book, where I ask him, you know, is playing sports, like, is athletics, is that okay, basically? According to you, you know, like, is this something that I should be aware of? Or because I feel like it helps with friends, like everything that I said, it helps with friendships, helps with community, helps with discipline, it helps with like all this stuff. And he basically was like, yeah, I can see it, and I've never thought about sports that way, but I can see it. And so I came back with like an even deeper trust of sports. So I didn't have much in the way of like an existential crisis when I came back.
That is cool.
I think of sports that way too, a lot. Sorry, go ahead, Quinn.
Okay, yeah, just going back a tiny bit, you mentioned that like Frisbee keeps coming back because like you can pursue to be the best, like the greatest, like in maybe kind of unique. I ask a ton of people this, but two-parter. How do you deal with pressure? You've won. I got your ultimate reference up here, and you've won like every single thing there is to win in Frisbee almost. So how do you deal with at every level, like even like when you were 17? It's crazy. How do you deal with pressure in big games and in general? It's something I find very interesting and something that I'm constantly trying to, you know, employ in my own game. So it's very interesting to hear from other people. And then second part is, did you ever feel, was there a time that you ever felt like you made it, like in Frisbee, and you didn't have anything to prove to anyone else or yourself anymore? Did that ever happen? And if it did, when? I'm curious.
Huh, okay, good questions. I think pressure feels fun largely to me. It also feels a little bit scary, which is I think part of why it also feels fun. I think one of the reasons that I like pressure is because it is like a forcing function where it's like I don't have a choice whether or not I can be, I don't know, fully kind of present and locked in, because if I'm not, then maybe I mess up, or also if I'm not, I can kind of like open up a crack into which like fear can kind of swim. And so I, like, even outside of sports, just that feeling of needing to be really locked in feels good. And I don't know, for whatever reason, luckily I'm like generally able to stay there during kind of moments where there's pressure. I mean, I think I've also, I don't know, being able to like win at every level, like you were saying, that's only possible if I've just like been lucky to find myself on a lot of those teams where I'm surrounded by a bunch of other good players and coaches. And like, I think one of the coaches, my high school coach, Michael Baccarini, would talk about like hunger. And I've continued to think a lot about the mindset of hunger being super important for performing under pressure, because if you're like attacking and kind of like competing with an appetite, it's a lot easier to perform than it is if I'm like trying to preserve an image or protect a previous kind of win. I mean, it's kind of like fixed versus growth mindset, I guess, too, in another way of putting it. But the other thing I've thought about that I just love is that sign that tennis players see. It's like a plaque right on the entrance. I think it's of the U.S. Open. And I think it's a Billie Jean King quote that says "Pressure is a privilege." The older I've gotten in the sport, the more I'm like, geez, even though I've been playing for like 20 years or something, if you were to take all of the games where I would characterize them as like high pressure, gotta perform, the whole team knows it kind of games, that's like probably, I mean, I feel confident that it's less than 24 hours total in that 20 years. And so the fact that I've just been able to be in those moments, which are so fast and so fleeting. And I mean, Kins, like you said earlier, they can kind of like just blow by, and I can kind of like black out during them. And for the games that there's not footage of, I don't remember hardly anything of winning college nationals in 2009. Like for example, I probably remember like 3 brief moments from that game, and that's it, so yeah, I don't know. I think, being able to think about the gift of pressure as feel fun. And and I also try and train myself to like it, like for the same reason like the Super Bowl or like a presidential debate is kind of fun for me to watch. It's just like, it's fun for me to step back from like the content and just think, these are people who are at their best, who are trying to beat the other, and like somebody's going to lose here, and so this is pressure, and this is fun to see how people respond to it. What was the second part of your question?
Do you ever feel like you've made it in Frisbee? Because from an outside perspective, I'm sure a lot of people, myself included, be like looking at you, I'd be like, yes, like he made it. He's been in the in my opinion, discussion of like best players in the world at some point, currently, whenever. So for you, does it feel like you ever made it?
I think when I moved from Minnesota to California and started playing Revolver and being on a team that for the first time, I mean, I guess taking Chain out of it, where I was just like a child playing, this was a team where I was like, I had a big role, and we were legitimately vying for like a club title. those were the years where I started to feel for the first time like I was maybe in that kind of conversation. Um, and then probably 2017 would be the first time where I felt like yeah, I'm here, and there's not there are certainly players that I admire and look up to, and certainly players that are better than me on like certain aspects. But I started to feel like that 2017 year, for the first time, like I can find a way to get an advantage
Mm-hmm.
over almost anybody,
Mhm.
which isn't the same as saying like I'm the best,
Yeah.
but something like that, finding a way to feel confident against pretty much anybody. And also
Well,
confident in my teams. I think being a part of successful teams has been a big part of feeling like I've made it.
yeah, I mean, so you played Paideia, right, and Carleton. So you've played with a shit ton of really good players. So,
Yeah.
I mean, when you were in college, I definitely thought of you as like the top tier echelon of college players, certainly. And I think had you made a leap to Revolver immediately after that, you probably maybe that would have felt like you reached there sooner. But I do have a couple questions about Paideia and Carleton actually, and World Games. Did you go to high school with George and Chris? Is that right? At the same
Yeah.
time?
George and I were the same year. Chris was a freshman when I was a senior.
Or was so was making like the World Games team? What was that feeling like to be on that team with high school classmates?
Yeah. In 2017, that was wild because 3 of the male players on that team had played on the same high school team together. Me and George and Chris.
That's crazy.
Yeah, that was wild. That was cool. I mean, in a lot of ways, I think that's like a testament to Baccarini, the coach, because
Mm-hmm.
he has just like built that program and has produced tons of good players. And when I was coming up, it was like Dylan Tennell
Mm-hmm.
and like Jolien Dahl, who went to Colorado, and Jason Simpson. And
Chicken? Did Chicken go there too?
Yep, Chicken went to Paideia too, and like a lot more who were great and better than I was when I was in high school. But yeah, that was sweet.
Who would win between the all-time cut team and the all-time Paideia team?
That's a good question. I need to map it out. Assuming it's like
I've written
men's
down
team, not a
some
mixed team.
Paideia names. Oh, if it's mixed, that's interesting.
That would be interesting too.
God, those are tough. But on the men's side from Paideia, I've written down Dylan, George, John, you, Jolien, Chicken, Kotcher. Did Cricket also go to Paideia? I must have gotten that off of Reddit. Moses, Wisebroad. I'm sure plenty of others. You might have mentioned Jason Simpson.
Yep.
The cut team though, that's gonna be. I don't even know. Chase, Nord, you, Nick Stewart. I don't know. That'd be a fun game to watch. I don't know if we can pick a winner, but if you could pick one,
to watch.
What would you
the difference? Yeah, I don't know. It's like that's hard to even say. I'd be canceled out because I'd be guarding myself on both sides.
But that brings up an interesting question. Like, is the offensive version better or the defensive version better of yourself? Because maybe it wouldn't cancel out. Maybe it would be. You just never know.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I actually think the answer to that question is the offensive side would win out a little bit.
That's the usual one, yeah.
Yeah,
me too.
Because I know what I'm lacking at in defense, and I would just do that. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think is Dylan Tennell the best player that in that entire Dylan Tennell at his best? Is he the best of all of the cut and Paideia crew?
Ooh.
maybe. I feel like he's up there.
He's definitely up there.
With size.
Did you play with him on
throws.
chain? Were you on this?
Yeah.
Was that okay? Cool.
Yeah.
You missed the 09 team though, but you played after 09, chain before and after.
Yeah, that's right. I kind of waffled between chain and Sub-Zero through college.
Gosh, would Dylan be the best player? Would Grant be the best player?
I didn't say it.
Grant might be you might be the fastest player.
Maybe.
I've got another cut question if we want to keep on this train. So the 2009-2010 final against Florida, pretty iconic game, like one of the first like huge games that was filmed, I feel like. I just want to know what it was like playing in that game. It was obviously so chippy, and you were just playing the biggest meathead douchebags ever, it seemed like.
Is this the one you don't remember that well?
I remember this one better than I remember the finals against Colorado the year before in 09.
Yeah, I just want to know what that was like. And also, were your guys' jerseys supposed to look like Superman? Was that a thing?
Yeah, okay, cool. that was a thing. They were supposed to look like that. That finals game in 2010, I remember Greg Connolly, I think that's his name. He was like maybe the head observer at that time. Just after the game, just sitting on the ground with his elbows on his knees and his head bent over. And I walked over to him and he was just like, I don't remember exactly how he said it, but he was just like, this was the hardest game to work ever. And this was like maybe the worst showcase of Ultimate that we could have put on.
Oh,
no. And I think Florida took a lot of the heat for that. And certainly the way we characterized Florida and like viewed them as the Carleton kind of crew, as a program that had, more better players having come from it, that's been around longer. We were a little bit more, the private school intellectual kids or whatever, who were like a little more pure about the game. I don't really buy that narrative actually though, because we were just like, we matched them in like chippiness. In every way, in chippiness. Yeah. A lot of people talked about the regional rivalry of Carleton, Wisconsin, but through my 4 years of college, Florida was always the team that I hated the most and that I wanted to beat the most. My freshman year, we were eliminated by Florida in semis. Sophomore year, we won. Junior year, we were eliminated by Florida in finals, and my senior year, we won. So I was only eliminated by Florida in college, and we, we had incredibly chippy games against them. One in like 4 inches of mud at Trouble in Vegas. That was another brutally chippy game that, probably for the best was not filmed. But I remember coming into that finals game in 2010 feeling like we're going to have to kind of do what they do, which in hindsight, maybe not the best strategy. So, we just couldn't, we couldn't figure it out. We couldn't win. It felt like our energy was also depressed. I remember spiking a water bottle at halftime when we'd gone down, I think 8-6, being like, where are we? We need to show up and be more fired up. But yeah, it was just one of those games where it was like we couldn't find the inspiration. And that whole season had also been weird. I think in some ways that was also a season where we had won the last year, and I've come to think that winning back-to-back is the hardest possible thing that you can do, because the whole year every other team has a bitter taste in their mouth, and you've got the target on your back and finished your season with satisfaction, and have spent the off season maybe celebrating.
A little bit extra.
Yeah. And I don't know. I'd had like a toe injury that had me sidelined a bit. So we had the talent to win it that year in 2010, but I don't know. The stars didn't align, and that was a dirty game. It felt like we were trying to beat them at their game.
You had I don't know if you remember, Luke Powers was guarding Brody, and Luke is what,
I remember.
5'7"?
Yeah. I remember actually some of the conversations about why we did that matchup too. And part of it was that if we thought that Florida was going to be such assholes that we were like, no disrespect to Luke, but we were all like, who's our biggest asshole? Let's put him on Brody. And I think that was part of it. And I don't know, if we'd won that game, maybe I'd be sticking by that strategy, but partly because we lost, I question it now.
I think Luke lives out here now. I've heard that, but I've never run into him out in Denver.
He's gonna hear this and give me hell.
We've hit the 1 hour mark of part 2. What else we got for Grant before we let him go for the day?
Do we want to jump into fan questions, or do we want to do? I would do one more question about Revolver if we wanted.
Yeah, let's. I am curious about what workout you just did. Kins actually wrote that down, and what your training regimen is like. Yeah, maybe and then maybe a Revolver question. So I'll ask him a little more officially. What is your training like? Do you lift much, or is it mostly track workouts?
This has been the most structured off season I've ever had, and I've been working with a PT, Doug from Resilient in Manhattan, and he's who comes to Club Nationals with Pony, or has for the last couple of years. He's great, and because I've been coming back from this injury, and also because I just turned 34 like a few days ago, and so
Happy birthday!
I want to try and stay. Thank you. I want to try and stay as effective, and if possible become more effective as a player. I felt like I needed some more outside expertise. So anyway, now that I'm like kind of back to full strength, my workouts have been primarily like 6 days a week. Nice. 2 workouts of sprint work with lower body lifting, 2 workouts of like tempo runs, which sometimes I might do a track workout in there, and then 2 workouts 2 days a week of like longer distance, zone 2, like heart rate around 130, 140, just for an hour, jogging. And then in addition to those 6, it's like some up, maybe one upper or two upper body a week, and some yoga. Right now it's just like whenever I can fit it in.
Damn, Grant is going hard. I love to hear it.
Do you keep that up like during club season, or if you like? I don't know how much you're practicing for Salt Lake, but if you were practicing 2-3 times a week, do you keep that type of work up?
No, I would. Okay. I would if each time I'm playing a game, like it would replace one of those 6 workouts.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Or like a practice too.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Sweet. I was gonna say I need to get on the track, dude. That would
insane.
Be a lot. But okay, similar.
I mean, one of the things that's been most interesting about this regimen, and having somebody else who's an expert be like, you definitely want to do this, you don't need to do that, is that I've started to realize, that I've worked a lot harder than I need to in some areas. Like I would bust my ass at the track running 200s, as hard as I could with, maybe not enough rest. And I mean, we'll see. I haven't played the full season, but so far it's like, I don't actually need to do that. I feel pretty good. I might not need to be working quite as hard, or like ruining myself for the rest of the day after pushing so hard on the track. That might also be a function of, getting older too. I'm not sure.
I think like consistency seems to be more key than burning the house to the ground once,
You just said something that a monk said actually too, that applies to so many different things. If you want to succeed, he said consistency is more important than intensity.
Totally. Yeah. That, I think I remember reading that now. And whenever I read that anywhere, it very much clicks with me.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah. Quinn, what do you got from about Revolver?
Yeah, I got one question before that. It's about your head injury and stuff. We're very everybody's very happy to see you back, obviously. But what was coming back and playing for the first time like after it? Because I had a bad one, not quite as bad as yours, but I had a pretty bad one in the last AUDL game last season, and I missed US Open. And then like the first time I played really was at Pro Champs, and it was maybe the worst tournament I've ever played. It felt like I had to relearn how to do certain things like throwing, even catching, and just like reading the field. I have never like turned over so many hucks, and it's just like I just couldn't figure out how to play again. So I'm curious what it was like for you, and if you experienced anything similar to that. Maybe I just rushed it. But yeah, I'm just curious how that was for you.
Huh. Yeah, that's interesting. Because I had, I think, like 5 months
Okay.
between the injury and actually playing my first game of 3-on-3, and because I wanted to be, and I had like an off season to also help me be really conservative with how I came back, and make sure that, you know, I hadn't had any symptoms whatsoever for like more than a month, and that I'd also gotten the green light from the vestibular therapist and from like the brain surgeon and all these people, that once I actually came back, the experience of playing in a point kind of felt like riding a bike. I kind of felt normal.
Nice.
But a lot of the experiences around that, like, you know, waiting for the pole to come up, or like, you know, driving to the stadium for the first AUDL game, which was like the first time I'd played 7-on-7 since the injury. And I'm still feeling some, you know, nervousness, still feel kind of anxious, still feel like, you know, I'm kind of reminding myself to like look around and like see, you know, the other 13 people on the field some. So yeah, there's some residual fear for sure.
Yeah.
How has it been getting to know the Salt Lake teammates?
It's been great. It's a different, I mean, I haven't practiced at all with them yet, so it's
Wow.
kind of early days yet. I've only played in 3 games, 2 of which we weren't really tested very much. So yeah, it's pretty early, but yeah, I don't know. It's a pretty young group. Play a style of offense that's really fast, which I like. Yeah. The coach Bryce is really good.
He's sharp.
Sweet.
He's
makes a
really
big difference.
nice too. He always says hi. He's been really kind to everybody in Colorado.
Nice. Yeah. He seems nice. He gets fired up, which I like. He also just is really organized in the way the practice plans are sent out on the Slack, and the way he, you know, even kind of like structures each you know, post game conversation. Yeah, it's been good.
Nice.
Cool. And in terms of Revolver, do you want to jump to that?
Yeah. Well, I got one more follow up, and that is, if you happen to be continuing to live in Utah for the foreseeable future, we got a decent club team out here that would be more than happy to make it work. Keep that in mind.
Good to know.
So thirsty, Mike.
No, that's
gotta make us seem cool. But like you could if you wanted
well,
to.
okay. Yeah, we consider it. How about that?
Right
that
on.
was
I
my immediate reaction. I saw you were playing for when I saw you playing for Salt Lake, I was like, I didn't know you like had a family or a house there and all that. I was just like, why is he playing for those guys? Like, why didn't he come play for us? It was like my immediate like, God damn it! Like, why didn't we get him? But
It's true.
Yeah, But like Mikey said, you know, maybe we'll consider it if you want to shoot us a text or something.
All right, cool.
Tryout application.
Yeah, we'll tell you who to guard.
Yeah. We're gonna need to see you on defense.
You want to make this team? It's gonna be on D.
We'll send you some names.
Hey, y'all are on top, man. You're the defending champs. I gotta earn my keep if I were.
I know. I like all this talk of the talk of repeating being the hardest thing is getting me a little jazzed up.
It's motivating. All right, go ahead, Quinn.
Yeah, just it's gonna be a kind of a broad question, but obviously Revolver has been known for, their intensity on the field for the past ever, as long as I've been in the sport. So I'm just kind of curious how the culture was on that team when you guys won, and you kind of came in at the end of like the dynasty per se, but just how the culture was and how you guys balanced being so competitive and so intense with fostering a good environment in a winning environment that everybody wanted to be a part of. And just curious how you experienced that and how it was.
I think you touched a little bit on the differences.
Definitely touched it a bit.
Yeah.
I mean, I did come in on the tail end, so I only have 3 years of their, decade or so dynasty to comment on. But those 3 years, we made finals all 3 of those years, and we won in the middle. And, in hindsight, kind of like wrapping up each of those seasons into like their own kind of little mini narratives. I think both of the years that we made finals and lost, 2016 and 18, were both years where Revolver was coming off of a championship the prior year. And I'm pretty sure that Revolver only repeated once during that.
10 and 11.
Yeah, because it was like Revolver and then Kurt would win. And
exactly.
Then Revolver would win, and then Kurt would win.
And I think Revolver's thing was like every year we got gray shorts instead of black shorts was when we lost.
Is that true?
Became a thing for the people.
Probably took a little too long to realize that.
I know, yeah. They kept trying to break the curse, but it kept on. So yeah, I remember feeling like in my first year on the team, 2016, feeling just like at first just happy to be there, pumped about how talented the team was, and towards the end of the season, starting to realize like, oh, this is not a team where just like victory is guaranteed, and this isn't a culture that I can just kind of like absorb and like be good. Like I've started to feel like there are things that I need to contribute to this team. And one of those things in that particular year was like more celebration, more praise. I kind of felt like, we had a bunch of people who I think were playing on some Team USA team that missed some stuff that came back, and we had also come off a victory. So it felt kind of like expectations were sky high. And anytime we did something right, it was just like, yeah, of course we did. Anytime we did something wrong, it was like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
And so I felt, kind of like this urge to help balance us a little bit more and give more celebration. My urge was the opposite 2 years later, because what I felt like in 2018 was we had just come off a title. We also won Club Worlds early on in the 2018 season. And it's sort of, I just remember talking like so much shit at practices, and really kind of being like, potentially too much of like a hard ass, and trying to bring out more intensity and more kind of like criticality than like praise, which is what I'd done.
Did you feel like the team was soft?
Well, I mean, there were a few things that just didn't work out that, were just like some of the unlucky things, like, Lucas, who's such a critical part of the team, was having, that year he was having kids, and they so like that was a big leader who rightfully was like spending a fair amount of time like preparing it for a big life event. And then we had a few injuries, like Joel Schlockett, who I think is also like one of the best players ever and kind of underrated to this day. He was such a critical part of Revolver's success. He was injured for a while that season. I'm pretty sure Ashlyn Joy, who again, I think is an all-time great and probably the
Right.
best shimmy of any player that
Most
exists.
iconic, smoother than
Yeah.
Jimmy's. Jimmy's got a
So
nice one.
smooth, so smooth. I mean, we do marking drills in practice, and you would know it was coming, and he could still just move you
Doesn't
and
matter.
then throw the eye up. Yeah,
It's like a Jedi.
yeah, exactly. But I think he was starting some like med school, so he was away a bunch. So we just had like, we had some attendance problems, some injuries. We were also coming, maybe a little bit complacent, even though we might not have wanted to be, because we'd won Club World and we'd won nationals the previous year. So once we kind of got to finals, which we did, I think largely just because we were so talented, whether we were playing Pony or Sockeye, because Sockeye almost won that other semifinal game against Pony. I think that was a double game point game.
Yeah, it was.
I think we would have gotten beat just as bad by Sockeye as we did to Pony.
Wow.
I mean, maybe not, because Pony had come up with a defense that was particularly effective against Revolver, but I don't think our energy and like our unity and just kind of the vibes that you were talking about earlier, Kens, on the team that year were as strong and cohesive as it seems like they were for Pony that year, for sure. And
I'm actually reminded of I played a Masters Worlds with Martin Cochran that year. He was coaching, I think, or one of the coaches of Revolver, and he had played on some of the earlier Dynasty teams. And I was asking him about it, and I think he said that the team was just so much more talented than it had ever been. Like he called you guys kids. Like the kids on the team are so good. And now looking back, I kind of wonder if he did almost feel like it was a foregone conclusion, and that maybe the team wasn't pushing hard enough. I don't know. Just I haven't thought about that for a few years. That conversation I had with him.
It felt like we peaked at Club Worlds, and we kind of trickled. The rest of the season kind of trickled by.
Double peak.
Yeah, it's tough to double peak.
Touching on just Joel Schlockett just for a second, I was not really a question, but I have played with him for one season on Bravo. Pretty down season for us, but so fortunate to play with that guy, and by far the hardest person I've ever had to guard. Like, I couldn't even bother him a tiny bit, and he just destroyed me. I don't know if you know anything about this, but on the Nationals trophy, you guys didn't put a plaque on it the year you won in 2017, and then I think Pony put one on, and kind of what was your guys' slogan? What was the 3-word slogan?
For Revolver, intensity, humility, discipline. IHD.
Yeah. So I think Pony put the plaque on, and it's the Revolver gun, which whether it's the logo or not, and it's tied up, and then it has that, but instead of humility, it says humidity on it. I don't know.
So good. That is classic. Like USAU. That is like, dude, that is the perfect encapsulation of what is so good and also like so lacking in the club ultimate scene.
Wait, so it's on the trophy?
Yes, it's on the. I'll figure out who has it right now. I'll get a picture of it and I'll send it to you, Abel. We can even clip into this. It's hilarious. Like, it's the funniest thing ever, and I think it's like right under there or right above their plaque too from 18. It's awesome. Yeah,
you gotta send me that. That's so
I'll find it. Yeah,
now you gotta ask your teammates about it now that you play for Pony.
Yeah.
And we need to get a plaque too, by the way.
We need to get a plaque too.
We need a plaque. Why do we make? Why is it our responsibility
that blows my mind.
to get
so
the plaque
stupid.
now? I just don't. That doesn't make any sense to me.
Well, you don't want them to increase dues again.
Right. Yeah, another 0.000% of a penny for like every person for the plaque that goes on the. That's funny. Yeah, God, hopefully we can find that balance of. I've definitely had that thought. It's like maybe I should come into practices just like shitting on everyone so that we aren't complacent. But I think I've got to the point where I'm just gonna hopefully trust that other people are not complacent as well.
It's
not being complacent myself.
It's really helpful to hear the perspectives of people who have been through this before and see if we can learn from other people's mistakes as much as our own, or experiences.
Yeah, I mean,
Maybe
I hope
shouldn't
you
even call
guys
them
don't
mistakes.
learn too much this year. But
Unless
but
you
next
fill
year when
out
you
that
play with us-
application,
unless I fill out that app,
Yeah,
that
yeah.
tryout
Oh,
app,
yeah.
that tryout
then we'll learn a
application.
whole ton.
Maybe
Before we go to fan questions, can I do one question wrapping up the book?
Honestly, I don't even know if
I
we'll
have-
have time for fan questions, but go
I have
ahead.
one. I'm just curious, like obviously it was such an extreme life. If you miss anything, what you miss the most about the 6 months that you spent in like borderline isolation? Like what do you find yourself missing now that you're back in this like whatever Western society and we're doing all these things? Like what do you miss the most about your time there that you wish you could add to maybe your life that you have now?
if I really think about it, there's a lot of different things that I miss. Maybe it's partly just because now is a particularly chaotic time for me, but I mean, I miss having one healthy meal prepared for me every day. I mean, that's like kind of an extraordinary privilege that is just like so nice. But I also miss wilderness being a big regular part of life. I think that's
And the simplicity.
Yeah, because you're in the
really
you're in the
nice.
concrete jungle, or I guess sometimes you are.
Yeah,
Most
yeah.
of the time. So polar opposite.
And then I think sometimes, I mean, a lot of it, probably the thing I miss most is just that the state of mind or just like all of the encouragement and like the structure to help you get into the state of mind that is as kind of like focused and loving as you can possibly be. That is something that is so easy for me to just deviate from, either to be distracted or to be ornery, and to have things that are set up to being
like funnel
focused
you
and loving
towards
feels, exactly. Yeah. I miss that. A lot of that kind of has to come from me. I mean, and it had to come from me while I was in the monastery too, but just, some places are I mean, it was expressly geared towards that.
right.
And so, yeah, I think also just like the pace. I mean, sometimes the slowness, the pace of that lifestyle killed me while I was in it. And of course, like now that I'm on the other side of it and I'm like busy and stressed out and my apartment's like a mess, I'm like, wow, it was so nice to have so little and to have also so little to do and to have conversations where, I was just with one person and it was like the sun was setting and we could spend an hour. And actually, I mean, we're kind of doing it right now and it's fun.
Yeah,
it is.
But
fun.
to have it be such a regular thing and to have these just like really long, that combination of focused and like focus and goodwill was something that was really fun. And now that I'm saying it like that, it makes me want to figure out how to
a little bit,
bring that balance a little bit more back into the life I've got now. But that's probably what I miss most.
Maybe the Salt Lake boys and you can figure out a culture that brings a little more focus and goodwill into the team.
I very much relate to that though, just like the daily grind. And our buddy Stanley Peterson, he's living with me now, and we've even talked about that recently, like in the last 12 hours, of how I wouldn't mind just quitting work and living in the mountains, and like my job would be to like sweep the floor or something. I don't know, just like keep it clean and livable. And just
maybe you need to go try it out, Mikey.
Yeah, maybe I need to follow in Grant's footsteps at some point. I don't know.
It is relatable. I often I feel like we can fantasize about it. That's why the book was so good, because you fantasize about it, then you go do it, and you're like, God damn it!
Yeah,
and then
exactly.
You come back, it's like figuring out. But like, it's like, can you exist in like this world where you have a little bit of both? Because there's obviously some things that we love about being in, like around other people and like whatever, having jobs or whatnot. But then also like that quiet and focus is so.
Maybe we'll, unless anybody has anything else, end with a couple thoughts here. I actually don't. I think we're gonna not have time for fan questions, unfortunately, unless you want to stay on for another 30
Let's
minutes.
do one.
But, okay. Should we? Which one should we do, guys? Should we do the funny one from Sean or?
Yeah, we'll do that one.
Definitely, yeah.
Is this Keegan?
Yeah.
All right, here we go.
Keegan asks, and maybe it's related to the book. I don't know. He said, if you shit your pants in a big game, would you miss 5 points to go to the bathroom to clean? Question mark. That's it.
I gotta go. See you guys later. If I shit myself in a game, would I miss in a big game? Would I miss 5 points?
Don't
I
feel
mean, yeah, I
pressured
think
to
you
get
have
to
to.
it.
Don't
It's
feel
like not
pressured
even
to
a.
answer.
It's not
No, I
even a
mean-
question. Yeah, you. What other choice do you have?
The immediate next question is how much shit. Like,
That's
Fair.
true, yeah.
and
Yeah, I
like
mean-
consistency of said shit. Big factors.
No
maybe
spoilers,
just-
but Grant did shit himself in Thailand, right?
Did. Tough day.
We've actually, well, I'll just give a shout out to Ben Levy because we kind of answered his question about what brings you back to Ultimate. How about this one? This is Frisbee related from Ethan Hilding asks, is Will Selfridge the future of Ultimate? Having played with him?
For sure he is. He's what, 19? He's fast. He can throw. He crosses over to D. It's an easy yes.
Yeah. What's he like? I've never talked to him. Bryce mentioned that he might have thought about coming to see you once, and I was pumped about that, but that did not happen.
Oh, nice. I didn't know about that. What's he like? I mean, I've only played 3 games with him, so still figuring everybody out. But he's, I don't know. He's eager. He's also, I mean, one of the reasons I think also the answer to the first question is yes, is because he's pretty conscious and intentional of playing his role, whatever that looks like. And I think that's something that somebody who is
So young.
as young as he is and as talented as he is, if somebody's thinking about their role and not just trying to do everything, that's a really good sign.
Good answer. Perhaps similar to a young Grant.
I probably
So-
helped it too much when I was young, maybe.
I want to give you a chance to maybe plug your book a little bit at the very end, but one more thing about Sean. He was texting me from wherever he is in the world, and he was asking me about Pony. So it sounds like you guys have a couple exciting pickups. Is that right?
I know that Ryan Osgar is going to be playing Pony. I don't know. I'm not 100% sure about anything else. And to be honest with you, I'm also a question mark for playing club this year.
Oh, club at all.
So
Because you're going to be playing for Bravo.
yeah.
Not club. Question mark on Pony, yeah.
Well, I do hope to see you playing if it works out.
Yeah.
The other one that he mentioned though was Alan Laviolette.
Oh yeah, I haven't heard anything one way or the other, but I guess maybe heard rumblings for.
And then hopefully
month
not
or so.
Jack.
Yeah, you never know, Jack.
I mean, what are we doing, man? What are we doing? Just
Yeah,
like
that'd
you
be
join one team that's really good, you win, you lose, and then you just go to the other team that's really good. I'm like, what are we doing? Is there no attempt to build anything or grind anymore? Like, what is this fucking nonsense?
I mean,
Player
it is funny
empowerment.
that when Ring beat us Pony in the finals, the person who
What?
threw the winning goal lived in New York, and the person who caught the winning goal also lived in
Lived
New York.
in New York. Yeah, that's pretty brutal.
Crazy.
Yeah.
That's exciting.
Anything else for Grant? Grant, do you want to
No.
just maybe plug your book for a second? Like, where can people get it? Is there anything else you might want to say about it now that the tour is over?
Yeah, you can get it on Amazon. If you don't want to support Amazon, you can get it on indie pubs. If you don't want to read it at all and prefer audio, that's coming. It's being
Ooh.
recorded now, and I don't know, maybe in a month or so, it's going to be
Are you
out.
Who's the narrator?
It's a
Oh,
pro. I'm leaving
picked-
leaving this one to the
I think
to
I
the
actually
pros.
was snooping your IG story at some point, and maybe you were sampling.
It was
voice
really
or
fun to get probably 20 different auditions, and like 18 of them were just like within 2 seconds, immediately, no way, this person
Really?
can't be it. And then two of them were like, one of them was like, maybe, and then one of the 20 was like, this is it, this guy's it. He is saying some of the lines like even better than I felt like I wrote them. He seems to get the story.
That's so cool.
I'm excited. I'm excited to hear more from him. So yeah, that'll come out in a month. And I just learned, this is like one of the most exciting things that has happened in the whole book, is that I got a second book deal. The book is going to be translated to Korean, and it's going to be released in South Korea in like a year or so. So if you prefer to read in Korean and you also listen to this podcast, you're in luck.
We'll have to put that on our story in Korean.
That's so cool.
Yeah, my brother-in-law's Korean. Maybe he can help me.
Nice.
Cool. Anything else in the works? Any other? Are you hoping to continue writing?
Maybe if I do a second book, I know what it'll be about. It'll be about the return and working at Google, and kind of like the difficulty of reintegrating. But I don't know if I'll write it. We'll just see. Right now, I gotta focus on baby, and
you got a lot of things to focus on.
Yeah.
New job.
And
yeah.
Don't forget, keep that mediocre Mormon on the back burner. I think a lot of people would find that interesting.
Yeah,
I'm gonna have to leave that to somebody else. I'm not the guy to write that book.
Not yet.
Not yet.
Not yet.
In 6 months. All right, Grant. Well, thanks so much for coming on the pod for part 2. Can't wait to see you out here. Are you coming to the game in Colorado, or will we see you out in Salt Lake when we visit you guys?
I think I'll see y'all in Salt Lake.
Sweet. June 16th. Well,
I'm going to test some of that free child mindset of getting real high, real low.
Try it out. What's the worst that could happen?
All right. Yeah. Maybe we can buy you a beer or something. Until then,
exciting.
Yeah, Grant, thanks again for coming on.
Right on.
Peace
Thanks,
out.
guys. This was fun.
Thanks.